doors are shut. All right. Thanks everyone who made it along in the middle or the tail end of the hackathon. I guess first of all, thanks Tim, Hannah, Lara, Nick. I, along with some assistance from ChatGPT, got prepared promptly for this session. I actually wanted to start with, hold on, we've got a few coming in. All right, awesome. I wanted to start with you, Nick. I guess we've been working together now for 7.5 years. I think it's. I thought it'd be interesting to start off by exploring. How do you think about your work in general? Because you're probably the only one that, maybe besides Gearbelt, for obvious reasons, probably have all products and all services stored in memory locally in your brain. And also sort of how your thoughts have changed over time. So it's a bit of a broad question, maybe we'll start there. It's just like, how do you approach your work now, and how is it different from 7.5 years ago?
In the beginning, I always work with small startups, and at those stages, you just do what is needed to make it successful. So every single one I joined has not turned out to be successful. Not to my fault.
Product's fault.
Sure, just don't like it. Back then, it was just, so I was hired to do the mobile app. Essentially, it wasn't really bad state. It was pretty critical for the company. I had just built a real-time, I had 2 projects that were real-time, and they both were offline by default. Like, that was a core part of those systems. That's kind of how Harvey got in contact with me, because the startup before went through the same accelerator. They couldn't keep me on because they were just like in life preservation mode. I think they're still in that kind of mode, which is funny, but still holding on. And so I think that profile matched exactly like what Harvey was looking for, more or less. Now, back then it was really focused. It was, this needs to be done, figure it out, right? There was one core engineer, pretty much. I had overlap with the original CTO, who had 1 week, so we could see each other and all. So it was really focused back then, and it made it easy to, we did not have unit tests or anything. It was JavaScript. It was, you just did what was needed. It's essentially like the way you write an hackathon without Builder, like the shittiest code you can imagine. That was the early days. But it worked. In most cases. The debugging was really hard, and then obviously you just listen to the customers. Meaning, if there's major issues, you just jump on. And honestly, those first 2 years is probably like at least 1 or 2 days per week where I worked through the night, where I essentially worked until like 8 a.m. and then had a 2-hour nap, and then essentially go back up, just to get stuff done. And I think that is the difference between people who join the startup early, on average, versus people who join later. Early on, your livelihood is on the line, because it is like, if you don't fix this company is going to go under, and you're going to need to look for another job. So in that regards,
there's like a very strong incentive to just deliver. And versus now, I still carry that with me. So the way I approach work is with the same drive of ownership. So I don't care about singular teams now. It's just literally like it's still the whole company. So go where I'm the most useful, essentially. So yeah, you can talk about 10 different ways about this, but I'm not sure that's clarifying at all.
Yeah, so to summarize, at the start, life or death determines how do you prioritize between technical projects and user impact, and as you scale, that some freedom.
It kind of changed from like, or dev to like, how successful. And that also has a direct implication on you, because if your personal influence can be the difference between month-over-month growth between 3% and 4%, after 5 years, that is a massive difference in, for example, your equity, like the value of your equity. So for selfish reasons, obviously, that is still really important.
I'm going to go through in the order that people joined Sitemate for this question, because I think it sort of touches on each stage of maturity. So Tim, you would be next. You and I met right before your startup with Ned. Maybe I think it would be interesting for folks to hear your reflections on that journey, and listening to what Nick just said in terms of how scrappy I guess we were in the lead up to sort of when you joined in 2019. Thinking back to your own startup, do you feel like you got that balance right between user impact versus engineering effort, and sort of yes or no, and did that tie to the outcome of that startup, do you think?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So everyone who doesn't know, I had a startup with a co-founder. We sort of went for 18 months, maybe just under 2 years, in expense management, so business expense management. We'd issue Visa cards to everyone who needed to spend money for the company. It's exactly like Air Wallets. So like it ultimately was an okay idea, but the execution wasn't spot on, and other companies just added it as a feature to their platform. So what we did wrong from like an execution point of view is it was a fintech, so it's a little bit different. You have to be pretty careful with money, but we went and invested in areas of the product that we didn't need to. So, for example, we had a full sign-up process. Now, we've only just recently introduced self-sign-up in Dashpivot. So we didn't prioritize that one at all correctly, because we could have handled the dozen to a couple dozen customers. We could handle them all manually. So yeah, definitely we got that sort of wrong, and there's probably a range of other similar decisions around like just laser focused on what's going to move the needle, whereas we sort of were a little bit too focused on this comprehensive product before like we'd figured out our growth, before we'd figured out like how to get that product into into more users' hands.
What stood out when you first joined Sitemate after that startup experience?
Yeah, so the it was like Sitemate and Hartley and Nick were far more focused on the end user, on making their experience as best we could. We had all of the users sort of asking for very similar features. So like the direction that the product had to go was relatively clear, and we just needed to execute and deliver. The actual technology at that stage was still like as bare bones as it possibly could be. So Nick did an awesome job stabilizing and getting it running, but you couldn't scale a company and a product and engineering team off of that technology. So like that was one of the first sort of things we needed to look at is, okay, if we need to add more people to the product and engineering team, how can we change the technology to assist and help?
Lara, you then joined, I believe we were 40, 50 people?
Yeah, I think 50.
Yeah, about that range. A number of the engineering team that you've worked with and been working with have been, I guess you could say, maybe not more technical from a skill set, but like working in more technical areas. I'm just curious, like, obviously you came in from Ericsson, which was not SaaS, or I mean.
They really want it to be though.
Yeah. How do you, from sort of, when you joined until now, that's when the scaling phase, sort of began, and, after, I guess, Nick joined, which was survival mode, Tim stabilization, and then we built the foundation, and then, as you joined, it sort of, that's when we started to see some more significant usage and larger scale, and obviously the team got bigger. With more technical folks, how do you weigh up what they're telling you versus, I guess, what I might be, or the go-to-market team, and sort of, that translation process?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because like when I started, the big thing for me was like a mindset shift. So coming from telco, customer is king, and not to the point of like, if they say like jump, it's not a matter of how high. It's like I'm going to get a pogo stick and jump as high as I possibly can. Like you bent down to them as much as possible. And when you're performing an activity, which usually happens between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. on a production network, if something goes wrong, you end up in the news, as I'm sure a lot of the Australians are aware of based on recent Optus incidents. You end up in the news. So due diligence and understanding the impact of what you're doing is really important, and having a lot of fail-safes in, because otherwise you don't sleep for 3 days because you're trying to fix this broken thing. So coming into Sitemate, one of the things I kind of had to wrestle with was people raising features or raising bugs, and having to understand how urgent it actually was, because at Ericsson, everything was urgent. Even if it wasn't, the customer thought it was urgent, so we had to act like it was urgent. Whereas I had to get this information from Hartley, from GTM, from support requests, and analyze, is this actually urgent? Does it match our strategy and what we want to do as a business? And then kind of make a decision from there about what we're doing. And then when it comes to doing more like technical kind of things, I think my experience and potentially trauma from having worked in telco, where if something goes wrong, it's catastrophic, it made me not distrustful, but you had to kind of convince me that you knew and you felt confident for me to feel confident that it was going to happen. If you're not confident that this is going to be okay, then I'm not confident. So it's about like kind of pushing the engineer, asking them a bunch of questions, which potentially sounded really stupid to like Yuncheng and Hudson, who were the two people on the team. Well, Nick was like around a lot in the team at that point as well, asking really dumb questions. But if you don't convince me with your answer, then we need to keep going until you do, until we're both feeling really confident that it's going to be okay. Because particularly in infrastructure, if something goes wrong, all the alarms start firing, everything, like bad things start happening. So we have to be really, really like pinpoint, like perfect with what we're doing.
Have you noticed any differences between, the engineers that you have and do work with in terms of how how those more technical infrastructure related tasks are, brought to your, attention for review or almost, proposed or sort of pitched? Or do you find that you're still, like, in most projects, needing to flush it out quite a lot?
I think they're a bit better at presenting what the benefit is. So, because my first question is, well, what's the benefit to the user? Like, it's what's the benefit, and then what's going to go wrong? Like, what can potentially break? So, like, I think they're a lot better at telling me the why and explaining the why to me, because that also gets me invested and also helps me defend it when, like, you come in and you're like, why are we doing this on the roadmap? It's like, well, we're doing it because of this, and this is how it's going to actually, like, support customers with what they're doing. Because a lot of like the infrastructure stuff, like it's not something we can add to our plan limits and on our like pricing pages and stuff like that, but like it's actually pretty important with how the product is working and has lots of add-on effects. So them presenting that to me and explaining that then helps me take that to Hartley, Tim, go to market and explain why we're doing it.
Unless we add export credits, then it will be on the pricing page.
Coming soon, 2023, or 2032.
2023?
It's already there, haven't you seen? Yeah, we forgot to unfeature flag it.
And then, keeping in order of, I guess, the timing of when folks joined, Hannah. So when you joined as, were you L1 or L2 when you joined?
L1, yeah.
L1, yeah. Yeah, that's what I remembered. So I mean, well, by definition of the level, when you joined, we're not the most technical member of the mobile team. But I think what you've been able to do is almost kind of demonstrate how, and there's been others that have done this as well, very well, how you can also get a lot done by not necessarily being the most technical person on the team, at least not at that point in time when you join, but by just knowing how to get things done and leveraging others. So and I've never actually asked you, like, how did you approach that first period where, you were able to actually get quite a lot done quite quickly, but, came in as level 1? Was that something that you picked up from previous roles, which, we also haven't spoken about in a lot of detail? Yeah, just a broad question there.
Yeah, good question. I think having not always been technical, but yeah, I studied psychology originally, then decided to kind of teach myself to code from the get-go. So I think I was more using mobile for myself. So I was just trying to understand like what product is really asking for, like what's the how, and then looking at the design, do the flows make sense, like how is it going to look like what we're trying to build. And then I think, yeah, not really sure if previous roles helped too much because I was in a startup as well. I was essentially the main engineer just by myself, and it was a web platform. So definitely coming into mobile was very different, very different problems between like Android, iOS, as most people know, and like just a lot of challenges. So I think in the beginning I just tried to take a few steps back and try to even understand like what does the product itself do, because mobile in itself is a smaller, like much smaller version of what you can do on Dash Pivot, but everything essentially still influences Dash Pivot. So yeah, if the template setups do influence that, so I think try to take a few steps back and try to understand how does everything come together and how does everything affect mobile.
Do you think, and I'm curious to get maybe Nick's thoughts on this as well, do you think that sometime, well, maybe I'll ask one angle and then maybe Nick the second angle. For you, do you feel like maybe not having, like technically where you were when you joined was maybe a blessing in some ways in terms of delivery, because it also means you don't have the curse of knowledge and you don't see all the things that could be done and you just focus on getting the thing done?
Yeah, I think can definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
Like coming in and not being like, not having the full, not as quickly understanding the full scope probably helps it to just limit the task at hand, not approach it with too much like what can we do better in other areas, which potentially should be touched as well, but ideally in a separate task.
Yeah, and there's a risk sometimes you might miss things that could be cleaned up, but...
Yeah, I think just I think I agree with that one.
So then I guess, Nick, for you, when you look at something now, you can probably see every possible optimization. Do you feel like that's a curse sometimes and like it's difficult to progress one thing, or how do you approach that?
The thing is, what really helped is actually the team growing a lot. And early on, all code was mine, right? At some point...
Or Terry's.
Or Terry's. Well, I still don't touch Dashboard Web, so it's still Terry's. At some point, new people join, and this tension arises, because they might be touching stuff that you load that's like your little property, and there's definitely ego tied into it. But you learn to let go of that and focus on what is actually important. Same deal with like AI stuff. The larger the team do, the more you have to let go and be like, okay, this might not be exactly how I would have done it, but it's still okay. And even if it's not, if there's small issues, it might not be important enough to raise it. One, to keep peace, but more importantly, to let others grow and learn. Like removing all potential issues beforehand is counterintuitive. You have the same with parenting, right? Like the bulldozer parents who just remove any obstacle or problem for their kids, but their kids don't grow, they don't learn resiliency or how to learn or how to solve those issues. So there are things where you see, okay, this is actually not great, but you know, also like you have the resources and you think like, what is important to get done? Everything is a big priority list. So if you had unlimited resources, yeah, you could start making a huge list of every single thing to improve right now, and then the day after you need to come up with 100 new ideas to improve, but that might not move the needle at all.
Tim, maybe to help out a few folks on either end of the spectrum, what do you feel like, or what do you see, people coming in, maybe making, not mistakes, but like maybe just like suboptimal judgment calls on either end of the spectrum, whether it's like, which one is more common? Do you usually see more people over-optimizing technically or over-optimizing for user impact and not considering, potential improvements? Do you feel like one is is more common?
It's something that we've tried to encourage and build a culture around this like product thinking in the engineering team. So it's definitely something that we're trying to address. Like we look for it in our recruitment. It's certainly not natural, I don't think, for engineers. So I think when you put your engineering cap on, you open up a code base and you start to see all the things wrong with it, and you start to focus on the wrong things, and you've got to put your product hat on and come back to like what it is, what are we trying to achieve here, and there is tension there in your like every day in your head every time you look at something. So I think definitely the best engineers are the ones who can handle that internal tension. There's a few really important traits as well. On the how do you do good work, like this is something that Hannah does, sort of sets the standard of understanding what it is that we need to do, and then making sure we execute at a high, at a really high level. And there's, the chance of missing something, having bugs, like half doing a task and sort of handing it off to someone else. Hannah sets the gold standard of thinking it through, fully testing it herself, and sending it when it's ready. And that just ultimately saves time and increases velocity because things aren't coming back all the time. So like that's then on one side. The other side, the sort of anti-pattern that I think sits with engineers is seeing something that's not ideal. So seeing some tech debt, seeing something technically that we could fix, trying to either fix it at the wrong time. So like it's adjacent to the work that we're working on, but we pull in this change that we probably don't need to address and we probably shouldn't be addressing now. So it's like expanding the scope technically, but not delivering any extra value. And so like that's again, if we can, we do know over time tech debt will slow us down. But it is something that we do need to look out for and we do want to address, but it's choosing the right time. And then the other anti-pattern is seeing it, talking about it, but never actioning it. And so like that does happen as well when you get in, you just create noise, like communication noise around, but don't ever move it forward. So yeah, there's definitely that engineering tension, and I think it requires just conscious effort.
It sounds like, based on what you've seen, probably it's at not only at Sitemate, but previous roles as well, that it's more likely for over-optimization to occur on technical requirements rather than,
Yes.
rather than sort of blindsiding them and then, leaving some tech debt in place that should have been cleaned up. It seems like the former is much more likely to occur than the latter.
That's right. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Lara, on your side, one sort of principle, and I've actually been wondering whether this should be a PDE operating principle, is from a product perspective, I've started wondering if we almost need some sort of principle which would be something along the lines of like, you need to earn the right to build infrastructure. And what I mean by that is like, you need to demonstrate demand through usage and breakage of, something simple to then earn the right to sort of warrant more to support that. I think it's something that particularly startups in the US are much stronger at compared to like most Aussie and European startups is just like not investing in things until there is like proven demand. So sort of in line with that, I wanted to ask if can you think of any projects on either end of the spectrum where you feel like maybe the investment was too large and didn't really have an impact, and then on the flip side, any that you feel like should have been done a long time ago?
I mean, I feel like it's yes to both of those points. Like, I feel like there's plenty of technical investment in some projects where at least the payoff is not immediate, but it's something that we feel maybe the payoff in like 6 months or like 12 months or something like that. And it's definitely hard to make the case for it. And then I feel like sometimes it definitely feels like it's just okay, like what's making the loudest noise right now, that it's like, okay, now we have to pull this in. And I think particularly with infrastructure, sometimes it is like, oh, well, we just ignore it until it's breaking. But by the time it's breaking, like alarms are going off, like it's a problem, and people are having to down tools what they're doing and kind of shifting focus, which isn't good as well. And then that's where like the prioritization like piece comes in, and like trying to figure out when it is important enough to pull it in just before it starts breaking, because the last thing you want is for people to have to kind of hack together something to stem the bleeding, rather than being able to plan it properly, think it through, and actually implement it. I think it's something that we kind of struggle a bit in infrastructure as well, because it's like, there's this ideal end goal that like you can build in 5 years' time, and it's like, oh, that's great, but then it's like, we don't really need that now. But it's really hard to also try and figure out how to break it up. So like, okay, what are we actually gonna get benefit from like right now, and how do we split that ideal up but still know that we can get there? That's pretty tough.
We one thing the sort of PDE teams need is the support from the business, though, that we can walk a fine line there. So
Yeah.
like it don't prematurely optimize something, don't create something until we actually need it. But we know that there is a negative there, and that negative is we might be too late. And so there may be user impact. So as long as there's like it's visible and there's that sort of support from the business, then I think it is better to wait, because then we know we need it.
Nick, a similar question to you. Do you feel like there is enough reflection on maybe larger initiatives, or can you think of any off the top of your head where you sort of got to the end of it and it was like, oh, actually that didn't, and that's over a long period, and vice versa. Anything's
You wish that maybe stuff we tackled that in hindsight was like we overspent resources on this?
Yeah, like maybe even projects from maybe years ago.
Well, there's loads of them. The flip side, there's also loads of them.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a good example would be the change streams, actually. Like the very first implementation of the change streams, conceptually exactly the same as it works now, but it was using a different data sort. It was using Redis. Because for some reason in my head, we needed extremely fast access to change data, be able to like query it faster than MongoDB could. And yeah, there's lots of funny stories around that period. Hardly might not find all of them funny because like we were throwing money away. That kind of then, but that's one of those where it was already kind of breaking, in this case from like a cost perspective. And so the rework was done very quickly, but the learnings from that resulted in the change streams we have today, and they're virtually unchanged since the very first beginning. So we're talking like pretty much like 7 years old. Those learnings, on a personal level as well, influenced a lot of things. The RFC process that was introduced came directly from it, because I was like, no, we need to be more thorough and think ahead of these things. So a lot of good came out of it. The change streams were designed in a much more deep way. And so I approached a lot of those things in a similar way now, because that worked out really well. And most of those systems that influenced it all kind of run the same way, like they just run extremely stable. But the difference is, generally I had a lot of time to think about them. Flowside is a very good example, the core infrastructure of Flowside. I had been thinking about over 2 years before we actually started building the product. Because there were pain points, and I kind of like puzzled on how to solve it, so thinking ahead. But then, same deal, like not only the action, just having them in your back pocket. There's other examples right now, permission service in like small state, but something's running, but the vision's there. Then on the flip side, where there's projects that I see like these could be extremely useful and solve a lot of problems, both now, but most importantly, like front-run problems in the future. There's a few of them as well, and that's where the tension starts, because you might have an opinion about this will solve things now, not that important, but especially that they'll solve things in 2 years' time. We've butted heads a few times on things, but that is normal, and also learned a lot out of that personally, where it's like you argue with those limited resources. So sometimes it is better to just wait and build hacky solutions until you know, like, now the critical mass is too strong and I can push and be like, no, we need to dedicate resources to this, and probably like give like a convincing argument.
Yeah, so that like the DL process would have highlighted like change streams v1. We chose a data store that probably didn't match what we needed, and a decision process, map it out, we would have chosen something else. But there was the definite benefits from it. The other thing we try to do is you need to plan. So we can't just completely forget about the future. So you do have to have the vision, you do have to think where it's going, but don't think too far ahead. So we have this concept of like 5 years. So don't try to build anything that's going to last longer than 5 years, because we'll get it wrong. Let's just sort of focus. We don't want it to last 2 months. We certainly don't want it to last forever.
Yeah, I still reflect on like the Redis v1 and then into Dynamo v2 for the change streams. To me, that's actually a good outcome, because it sort of goes back to what I mentioned before, like we had to make a change because the usage was so high that it was causing a cost problem, find a more economical database. Like, I would much rather we end up in those situations more frequently rather than, rather than like we build something that, and invest time in something that gets no usage or usage in not a way that we were expecting, and then it doesn't do anything. We've got a few minutes. If anyone, audience has any questions, I guess, related to this topic, you can either just raise hand, shout them out, and I can repeat, or we can shuttle a mic out. But yeah, anyone got any thoughts, questions? Yeah.
It's just a question relating to me, just that conversation there. With probably not as much B2B SaaS but B2C SaaS. Do you think enough's being done to consider SaaS is no longer, with AI, SaaS is no longer a zero marginal cost. LLMs are expensive, manual companies like problems. Is it are we including enough understanding of the costs of LLMs while we're trying to?
So just to repeat the question, so yeah, Carl asked, given that LLM usage comes with a cost, and depending on how frequently and how much you use it, that cost could be high. Yeah, is that cost consideration being factored into engineering decisions and product decisions as well? Is that? Yeah. Where to start? I won't name any names, but certain, maybe I'll start at board level, because it's come up there. Although the conversation was quite short, and it was basically, don't worry about the cost at all. Just find the use cases that drive, growth, interest, and can like transform the user experience for either a product or a certain area of the product. Basically, just go back into hunting mode for demand. Like, try to find demand. And I generally agree with that perspective, because ultimately, like, that's basically what I was covering in the kickoff, which is, we have cloudy skies and we need to kind of search and listen and like find those, 2 or 3 use cases that could drastically change the Sitemate mobile app or Dash Pivot or maybe even Gearbolt as well. So yeah, I generally agree. But then on the other end of the spectrum, Sam and I have also discussed like AI bells and whistles features, which like things that may get used, may look fancy, but may just be margin eroding, shiny buttons. So yeah, there's definitely a friction there, and I think it's why we, went down a couple of rabbit holes, but didn't actually push anything to production, because we felt we probably could have shipped something quickly, but it didn't feel like a 10x improvement on a user experience and on a user's experience. And if it's not like a significant improvement, then you're probably not going to see the benefit with marketing and sales and usage and word of mouth and NPS, which would then warrant the investment of like paying, Anthropic or OpenAI, in my view. So yeah, that's sort of like two ends of the spectrum. There's also Moore's law to be considered, which the cost, is dropping quite quickly. if anyone wants to read, it's Moore. I think it's Mohr', Moore's law. It's just about technology cost change over time since sort of initial release of the new technology, and how it's like a pretty steep reverse exponential curve. Yeah, I can't remember the
So
spelling.
the origin is essentially CPU power. I think
Number of transistors.
yeah, essentially number of transistors. But they changed it recently to like actual computing power. I think increases by 10 every 5 years on average. I think that's about the rate.
Yeah.
And so if you plot that since the transistor was built, that is still spot on. And that has a direct correlation to cost of running things. The analogy you can make is around storage. Now it's all about AI, but 10 years ago it's all about like just getting data stored. And data storage was much higher back then than it is now, but data storage also dropped. So you can build features and be like, this is gonna cost as much, but in 5 years we can kind of figure out like it's gonna cost us like only a fraction.
Yeah, I'm much more. Yeah, to go back to your question, Carl, I'm much more concerned about us not trying enough things and not finding those, potential amplification, features during this phase, versus the cost of what it's going to be to use that. Even with like AI templates, which will be the the first AI platform team feature that likely goes to production. That one in particular has like a direct, customer success hiring roadmap implication. Our team that's been working in solution engineering, we're going to be able to redeploy energy and like capacity to other domains, like in marketing, for example. So we get like it's a much more interesting application rather than just like sort of building simple forms. Let alone the speed reduction and the impact on sort of onboarding and potential churn risk reduction, because everything gets pulled forward. So yeah, I think there are some cases where you look at the LLM cost today and it's already a no-brainer, and then that's probably going to go down further. But yeah, it shouldn't be used irresponsibly, or not irresponsibly in the sense of like the use case, but just unnecessarily, basically.
You can kind of, these days, some people are literally replacing business logic by AI. Maybe you have full programs running by AI just to drop them. As an early thing to just get stuff shipped really quickly, that could be enough. But then over time, there's stuff you can do, like pull certain parts of that logic out and write actual code for that, so it runs much more efficiently, much cheaper. And then there's already huge amounts of cost optimization techniques that are coming up with AI. Model selection is a big one, obviously. So as an industry, it's still very early on, right? Nobody really knows how to solve certain things, but a lot of smart people are thinking about it. So yeah, I kind of got the same idea where it's like, no, just start trying stuff, and whatever sticks, figure out how to make it help your company, and then focus on, like, for example, cost optimization or latency reduction or whatever you need to. So more, I think as an industry, you're noticing it, like everybody's getting more into this mindset of like, let's just do a lot of experiments, really small, quick experiments. I think that's very valuable. I think out of this era, a lot of very interesting and new ideas will arise.
I have a question. You know what, there's like 50 new engineers or like a lot of new product people. One's like one big from everyone. That would help everyone actually with Fireside like that, help grow with them.
Okay, so Gary's question was for all of the new PD team members, about 15 recently, plus a few more on the way. One quick tip from each person that will help them just generally, or grow within. Okay. I'll keep mine simple and recent. I think the people that sort of interpret what I'm trying to change in our thinking by introducing the clarity around the mission and like instantly absorbing that into how they think about prioritizing everything, like whether it's bugs, monthly planning, quarterly planning, tech debt, developer experience. I think the numbers will show it within a quarter or two in terms of the impact on users. So therefore, I believe the people that absorb that the fastest will probably also grow the fastest. But it is going to take a couple of iterations to get that going. So that would be my one. Tim?
So, I mean, very similar is...
If ours can be the same if you want.
Yeah, like it's just focusing on that user value, like focusing on...
Which now we have a measure for,
yeah.
And previously the measure was...
Previously, it was a little bit hard to like make judgments yourself, like individuals making judgments about what does actually matter and which direction we are going. And it is definitely that tension we talked about before about do we fix some tech debt that sits adjacent to our work, or do we focus on change that is going to make a difference? Well, we focus on change that's going to make a difference.
I guess I'm going to answer from more of a technical perspective. As an engineer, I think, not being afraid to ask. Like, the product is so big, and especially technically, there's so many different aspects to it. But there's so many great people at Sitemate. Like, in the beginning, I definitely, not bothered, but definitely asked some people quite often about why this was done this way or how this actually works from a product and a code perspective. And I think that definitely helped me getting ideas and insight from other people that also look at things differently than I would have had. So I think just asking for help, I guess.
I think for mine it's like a little bit kind of a extension of Hannah's, like, don't be afraid to just give it a go. But while you're giving it a go, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution. Like, I don't really want to have to do the thinking, and it's very easy. You can kind of tell like the standouts in the team, or like where I kind of like someone's like, hey, I've found this and I think this will be good because of X. And like, this is what I want to implement, and this is why I think it's the best way. Like, for me to just kind of skim that and be like, like, sounds good. Or like push and ask a question like I don't want to have to solve your problem. Like, come to me with the solution and we can debate it, or I can bring Nick in to debate it or something like that. But like, the people who kind of just come with the ideas and then want to implement it, like, I think it's very rare that someone will be like, nah, we're not doing this, without like a genuinely strong, like, okay, this strategically doesn't make sense right now because of this, but like, that was an awesome idea. So like, don't be afraid to just do the thing.
Yeah, those are really good tips, actually. I'll kind of extend to Hannah's point a little bit, because it's applicable to any, it's more engineer focused, but actually not really, but it's for any level. Kind of be hungry about understanding, and with understanding I mean like, see the systems in your environment. That could be on like a quote-unquote code level, more like understanding how your piece of, like your area fits in with other systems on a technical, from a technical view, but also in other areas, kind of understand a change that you make, how it impacts other areas of the company, just product within your own team, but also go-to-market or your customers. Like, try to understand the systems that drive those things, because everything is tightly connected, and one change cascades out and has effects on completely disconnected, well, seemingly disconnected areas. Just essentially trying to understand the patterns in the seeming chaos on all different modes.
Awesome. I think we're up on time. So yeah, thanks guys for joining. First PDE session. Great job. Thanks. And I believe we are heading out to dinner. So we are due. Does anyone know what time we're due in the lobby?
I think it's 6:15 for those of you feeling confident in your hackathon projects to go to dinner.
Okay, awesome. Thanks everyone.